My girlfriend, a 22-year-old female, confessed to me, a 24-year-old male, that she had been speaking to someone else over Instagram and that she had felt attracted to him. She also expressed guilt and regret for her actions. I was shocked and lost my composure. You may be wondering why, since nothing physical happened. Well, I have a keen ability to detect lies, and this was the biggest load of bull I had ever heard. She had been emotionally distant since the beginning of our relationship, so feeling guilty for just talking to someone didn't seem like her. Despite being too attached to her, I tried to let it go and focus on work. But something felt off, and I couldn't shake the feeling. Paranoia consumed me from the inside out. In the following weeks, we were distant with each other, and she suddenly became more social, going out with different friends, or so she claimed, even though she barely had any. This was enough for me to realize that she had only told me a half-truth, and was still engaging in shady behavior. I still don't understand why she would confess to something, and then continue doing it. Our relationship was practically dead in every aspect, and I had suggested breaking up because I saw no point in continuing. But she insisted on trying, because I had helped her secure a good job, and she was making progress thanks to my connections. When I realized this was her motivation to stay with me, something inside me snapped. I had been there for her through unimaginable family issues, professional frustrations, and personal betrayals from her friends. I gave her my all the time. I lived to make her happy. But in reality, she had been taking advantage of me and keeping me in the dark. Being the idiot that I was, I started plotting my revenge in silence. I contacted a girl, Jay, who had given me her number a few months prior, but I never called her because I was faithful to my girlfriend. I explained why I never called, and she was on board. On our first date, we only flirted, but she surprised me with a kiss at the end. It made me feel guilty and awkward. The very next day, while my girlfriend was in the shower, I snooped through her messages and confirmed my suspicions. She had been carrying on with this other person to an unbelievable extent, going out multiple times a week, sending explicit messages, and even doing so while I was with her. She even copied and pasted sexual messages that she had sent to me when we first started dating. She even posed for him in clothes that my parents had given her for Christmas. My guilt disappeared, and I somehow managed to control myself from confronting her and exposing her. This fueled my courage and blind rage, so that night I called Jay again and followed through with my anger-driven plan. In an anger-driven way, I acted out in the worst way I could imagine. For the next 2 months, I continued this behavior. I had sex with Jay as much and as often as I could, while still trying to maintain a facade of being a normal boyfriend. Some days, I spent the entire evening avoiding Jay just to see my girlfriend at night and continue my hateful actions. I even went as far as to plant seeds of mistrust towards her, just to make her feel anxious and guilty. In the end, I ended things with my girlfriend, exposing her lies, but kept my actions to myself in order to maintain a sense of moral superiority over her. Even when I showed her proof, she denied everything and begged for us to get back together. This only made me feel like everything I did was for nothing, and left me without any closure. Jay became comfortable around me, but I was too far gone into my own twisted narrative to even consider being with anyone else. I had to end things with her as well, but in a much less dramatic way, since she was partly aware of my actions and was mostly in it for the sex. Months passed, and the girl that my ex despised the most, because she was popular among our mutual male friends, ended up working with me. To my surprise, we ended up hooking up and getting close, but it was never serious. My ex was still bitter about our breakup, and when she found out about my new relationship, she texted me to confirm it. Instead of responding, I drove to her house to tell her in person and watch her crumble. Looking back, all of this only messed with my head. While her cheating gave me anxiety about being betrayed by others, my own actions proved that I was no better than her. It wasn't until I realized this that I was able to change my treatment of women and relationships. I would never stoop to such levels again, but it took this experience for me to see the consequences of letting anger and hate consume me. For those who feel sorry for Jay, I only used her as my accomplice because she was in a relationship when she gave me her number, making her an easy target for my manipulation. I thought I was seeking justice for myself and others, but in reality, I only caused harm. I do feel remorse for her, as she didn't deserve to be caught up in my mess and treated poorly. She was the only one smart enough to cut ties with me. As for my cheating wife, I found out about her infidelity while she was in her hometown. When she returned, I ended things and told her she would receive divorce papers soon. It wasn't until I met my current wife in an online book club about 10 years ago that I truly learned the error of my ways. At the time, I didn't know much about her besides the books she was reading. But when I found out she was going through chemoradiation for stage 4 metastatic cancer, I reached out to some guys in the group and asked if they would be willing to send small gifts so I could put together a care package for her. When she received it, she was overjoyed and grateful. We started messaging each other privately and eventually became friends, leading to our current marriage. And eventually it blossomed into a long-distance relationship. I continued to send her letters and small gifts, which she would open after every chemo appointment, until she finally went into remission. We lived 1,000 miles apart. I flew to visit her. She flew to visit me. After all the back and forth, she eventually moved to my state. We bought a house together in 2015, got engaged the same year, and got married in 2016. On the surface, it was a great marriage. We had one argument in the entire 6 years of marriage. I was making good money, which gave her the opportunity to land her dream job, which she still holds today. We had a great income and no kids. Removing the stressors of money and kids from our marriage left little to argue about. If we had disagreements, we resolved them within hours, or so we thought. I will expand on this later. In 2020, we sold our house and moved 1,000 miles to live closer to her family. She had a hysterectomy in May 2021 for chronic bleeding and required 2 units of blood prior to surgery because her hemoglobin was critically low. I was fully supportive of her. She took 12 weeks off work to recover, and I took 6 weeks off work to care for her. The surgeon cleared her to return to work after 6 weeks, but I encouraged her to take the full 12 weeks off to recover. However, a week before she was scheduled to return to work, she flew out of state to see her female friend and coworker. During that stay, she had sex with another man with whom she had been having an emotional affair for months. I don't know if I was the first person she had a sexual experience with post-surgery, or if it was him. He knew that she was married. How I discovered the cheating was completely by accident. Last weekend, she was out of town for a conference. A couple of things, which in retrospect had no direct relation to the affair, occurred that gave me a bad feeling in my gut, and I went through her computer for the first time in our marriage. I saw explicit texts and photos. When I picked her up at the airport, I drove her to our house, parked in the driveway, turned to her and said, "Look at me. I know everything. I know that you've been cheating on me. I have seen the photos and text messages. Here's what's going to happen. You are going to go inside and grab your essentials. You can go stay with your parents or friends. The next time you will hear from me will be through my divorce lawyer." She did not deny anything. As she was walking through the house to pick up her belongings, I walked behind her. It felt like a stranger was walking in my house and going through our belongings. I never raised my voice or my hand at her, just like during our 6 years of marriage, during the entire process. After she left, I turned on the alarm system and stacked chairs against the front door. I was afraid that she would come back if I fell asleep. It felt like an intruder was breaking into my house. I slept for a total of 50 minutes during the last 24 hours. After she left, my intention was to call a divorce lawyer the next day. I could not take a day off from work. I texted her to come to the house, as the title is in both of our names, and I was not legally allowed to kick her out before leaving for work. I wanted to make sure that she was not going to do anything crazy in the house alone. We agreed to talk after I returned from work. We talked for 2 days in a row. There was a lot of crying from both of us. What seemed like a great marriage on the surface was marred by a lack of communication from both of us for 6 years. We both avoided conflict and instead chose to bottle up our feelings. We learned more about each other in 2 days than we did over the course of our entire marriage. While she was away on her conference trip, I drove 1.5 hours to help her 90-year-old grandfather get out of bed, provide incontinence care, help him use the toilet, assist with breakfast, and give him medication. This was the second time in 2 weeks. She texted me how much she loved me and how she appreciated what I was doing for her grandfather. She claims that she was going to break up with me after returning from the conference, under the guise of falling out of love with me and not mentioning the infidelity to avoid hurting me. I honestly don't believe her and have a strong feeling that she would have continued to string me along. Every single issue could have been resolved if each one of us had put in just a little bit more effort. While we shared some common interests, we could not relate to the interests that were most important to each one of us. On the first day, I blamed her entirely. On the following day, I started to blame myself for not being an attentive husband. After working from home all day, all she wanted to do was talk to me when I came home from work. I just wanted peace and silence after working for 12 hours. She wanted to talk about social and personal issues that were important to her, but I did not even offer a listening ear because I could not relate to her experiences. These are just a couple of examples. There are dozens of others, and I don't claim to have been a perfect husband. I have my faults, but I genuinely tried to make her happy, at least as much and in ways I could. I found her at the lowest point in her life, dealing with a previous marriage, cancer, anxiety, depression, seizures, and future alcohol offenses. Excluding the affair, we will be getting divorced at the highest point in her life. She is in cancer remission, has been abstinent from alcohol for 1.5 years, has had no seizures for over 3 years, and her anxiety and depression are better controlled. She also has a great group of friends and family who live close by. On the other hand, I am at my lowest point now. I uprooted my life for her after the move and have no local support. I haven't told my parents because they will be devastated. I'm afraid that the news will send both of them to the hospital because they love me. Loved her so much. We are currently living as roommates and friends in our house. We have agreed to make the divorce and transition as smooth as possible for both of us, even if it takes months. She offered for me to keep the house, take the newer car, and keep both of our cats. I can see how remorseful she is. Yesterday, we attended a virtual Al-Anon family meeting, which provides therapy for family members of alcoholics. What resonated with me was that family members should not blame themselves for the behavior of alcoholics. I feel like I'm blaming myself for my wife's infidelity when I'm the actual victim here. I'm here for support from others who have gone through similar experiences. I'll need to learn to trust my future partner when the person whom I had complete trust in blindsided me like this. My first session with Infidelity Survivors Anonymous is this Saturday. Edit. I will add this detail for context and not to excuse or give a legitimate reason for her to cheat. She was my first serious relationship. I had a couple of flings before her, but they did not progress to anything more serious because of a problem I had, ED. While we had a spicy sex life when we were in a long-distance relationship, once we started living together, the problem returned. At one point early in the relationship, we went many months without having sex. She begged me to see a doctor, but I kept putting it off. This was entirely my fault. I was younger, less mature, and frankly embarrassed. Eventually, at age 29, I'm now 33, I got tested and found out I had a very low testosterone level. I don't know how many years I've lived this way, probably a decade, because I always felt like I had less energy than my peers. I received testosterone replacement therapy at that time and felt like a new man. We started having sex again, but admittedly, it was never as good as it was in our long-distance relationship and never lived up to the fantasy we had prior to living together. There were still times when I couldn't stay hard, though they were much less frequent than before. She did say yesterday that while sex was less frequent, she did enjoy it when we did have it. What I lacked in one area, I made up for in another area by giving her oral, which she loved, and vice versa. Recently, I started to feel like my testosterone levels were low again, Now, more mature, I went to get tested and have a follow-up visit next week for results. Again, this is not to minimize her infidelity, but if I talk about her flaws, it's only fair that I mention my own to paint the complete picture.